This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk a little bit more about Ethereum's dirty history. In part one of this video, we covered the pre-sale, the pre-mine, and a lot of the very suspicious things that were going on at the genesis of Ethereum. Now, you may wonder why I'm talking about Ethereum's history. Doesn't it not matter because the currency is what it is? Well, the reason we have to do this is because Vitalik Buterin is still in charge at Ethereum. People pretend that he's not, but he obviously is the driving force behind Ethereum. And so to the extent we understand Ethereum's history and how Vitalik has behaved in the past, it gives us very good insight into Ethereum as a currency. And what I'm going to be talking about in this video is whether Ethereum has credible neutrality. Is it a neutral form of money? You can't have a form of money that's just made for some people and not made for other people. The way Ethereum markets itself is you have these smart contracts. Everything can be created using computer code, and you're not reliant on biased human beings. The problem with this is that Ethereum has a history of reversing transactions, doing hard forks to help some people, and then failing to do hard forks to help other people. All of this is driven by the fact that we had this huge pre-mine in Ethereum, which just is not present in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. 60% of current ETH was pre-mined or pre-sold to insiders. And this is what I talked about in that previous video, which I'll link to before. This really does recreate the current corrupt financial system, all the Cantillon effects that we've talked about. Those who are closest to the money printer have special power. Whereas with Bitcoin, you need to buy it on an exchange or you need to mine it. It doesn't have this pre-mine history. And we'll talk a little bit about Satoshi's coins at the end of this video if you wonder if that's analogous. So stay tuned for that. Now, one reason that insiders and original investors in Ethereum love the move from proof of work to proof of stake, where you basically just stake your coins and then you can earn more, is because they can now just sit on their hands and earn more. If you want to mine Bitcoin, you have to buy expensive equipment and you have to pay for electricity. There's no guarantee that you'll make money. This looks more like capitalism. What we have with Ethereum is much more crony capitalism and cantillionaires who like to sit next to the money printer and then drive ETH development in a direction, for example, towards proof of stake that helps these initial stakeholders. Ethereum really does recreate the corrupt fiat financial system in this way. I talk a little bit about proof of stake versus proof of work in this video, which I'll link to below as well. And I'd also ask you, if you're finding this video helpful so far, to hit that subscribe and like button. Maybe share this video with a few friends who are into Ethereum to see what they think about it. So I'm going to talk about two incidents in the history of Ethereum and how they were handled. And they were handled very differently. And I'm going to use this to demonstrate that ETH is not neutral money. If it's not neutral money, that's a huge problem, because if you're not going to use neutral money, you might as well just go back to the US dollar. It's very convenient. It's very corrupt. It helps people close to the money printers on Wall Street and at the central banks, etc. We would hope that the new world reserve currency, that a new cryptocurrency would do this better. So let's talk quickly about the DAO. The DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, but the DAO was essentially a VC fund, a venture capital fund that was completely decentralized. It was built on Ethereum. It raised money through Ethereum. They crowdfunded and got 11.5 million ETH in April of 2016. Now, before they had a chance to really invest this in companies, and it was this completely decentralized VC fund where the holders would decide what companies to invest in or what projects to invest in June of 2016, so just 3 months after the initial crowdfunding, some hackers found a bug in the DAO code that enabled them to siphon off some of these crowd funds, 3.6 million out of the 11.5 million. Now, depending what price you use for ETH, you come up with numbers about, I believe it was about $50 million at the time. So a really significant chunk of change. Now, what happened is once this was found out, that ETH was segregated in an account while they decided what to do. And this tells you something about how decentralized a currency is when you can have people decide what to do. But basically, the outcome was that the Ethereum network was hard forked by Vitalik and the other developers to magically restore the ETH to those who had committed it to the DAO. So they got their money back. And the really significant thing about this was that the computer code was broken. There were contracts here. This ETH had been committed to this decentralized organization, the DAO, and everything was bypassed by this hard fork. Now, this from an ethical perspective, it seems this was a good thing to do. The money was being falsely appropriated. It was being siphoned off by hackers who had no affiliation with the original project, presumably, though maybe the whole thing was a scam from the beginning. It's really hard to know the details, but the important thing here is that this was not neutral. A contract was broken. The whole Ethereum was hard forked. The whole network was hard forked to magically break this contract and restore the money to the people who had lost it or had committed it to the DAO. Now, this is something that is very unusual when you hear that everything is smart contracts, everything is neutral. Here's an example of maybe these people made a mistake by committing their funds to the DAO, but this was an intervention from the outside. And the entire network was hard forked. As a result, modern ETH is the result, the direct descendant of this hard fork. Those who did not like this hard fork stayed with the original, which then was renamed to ETC or ETH Classic, Ethereum Classic. This became a dead project. It's been 51% attacked many times, and it's no longer relevant. It's been delisted from many exchanges as well. But this is an example of what happened with ETH, where you had this hard fork that was done to help early investors and insiders and big developers at the Ethereum Foundation. These were the main holders who were involved. So let's contrast this intervention with another similar problem that happened the next year. There was a company called Parity that had these multi-signature wallets, multi-sig wallets. There was a bug in them that froze all of the ETH, $500,000 ETH. It was unclear whether this was just a mistake by a developer in the code who morphed the code and then accidentally froze all this multi-sig wealth, or whether it was a deliberate attack by a hacker. Either way, there was a lot of debate in the community at the time because 500,000 ETH was a significant amount. And the proposal was made to have a hard fork that would allow this ETH to be unfrozen and move to secure wallets, and thus help the people in a similar way to the way that the investors in the DAO were helped. Now, for some reason, Vitalik refused to help. This would have been a very simple code fix, and it would have helped to free up this 500,000 ETH. Now, why did he refuse to help? Well, it's very interesting because the main party that was hurt by this multi-sig wallet freeze was a project called Polkadot, which is now really well known in the crypto space. Their multi-sig setup was one of the main things that was affected. And there was a lot of talk here. For example, back in November 2017, just as an Ethereum hard fork was used to retrieve stolen funds after the DAO hack in 2016, a hard fork could be used to unfreeze these assets. At this point, there's no indication that Ethereum's leadership plans anything of the sort to undo the Parity bug damage. It's always interesting when you hear that a currency is completely decentralized, and then articles talk about Ethereum's leadership. Now, Parity was founded by Gavin Wood, who's also the founder of Polkadot. And so we have this strange situation. Well, it's not surprising, actually. This is how Cantillon effects work, that Vitalik refused to do a hard fork when it was a competing platform, Polkadot, that ran into trouble. When it was the original ETH people, he did do the fork for the DAO. And so we have an example here, a very clear example of one situation, the DAO, where there was a hard fork to bail out the insiders who needed it. In this case, it was outsiders. It was mostly people who were creating a competing platform. They were not helped out. And so this really shows you how Ethereum is not a neutral platform. And there's no reason that you would ever expect it to be, because it had this huge pre-mine, this huge pre-sale. It's got a charismatic, centralized leader who really drives the direction of development. And so people who pretend that you have these computer contracts, these smart contracts, forget these examples where anytime Ethereum wants, these things can be overturned. And they will be overturned if it helps the original insiders. This is why they're moving to proof of stake and doing that hard fork. And if it doesn't affect them, then there will be no intervention. Basically, Ethereum is recreating the corrupt current fiat financial system. So if you want good money, it needs to be neutral. If you want corrupt money that's printed and controlled by insiders, where you have central banks helping Wall Street, you can just stick with the US dollar. It's very convenient to use, etc. In this sense, Ethereum is really not a good substitute. ETH can never be credibly, believably neutral money because of this pre-mine, pre-sale, and this high concentration of the money among early people who benefited from this, like Vitalik. And Bitcoin really has nothing like this. People will say, well, the early Bitcoin miners had an advantage. They didn't. They were subject to proof of work. They sold almost all their coins to pay for the electricity and equipment costs. All of the early coins were mined. They weren't distributed in this corrupt pre-mine, pre-sale that Ethereum had. There was no special airdrop to a privileged few who were VCs, etc. You can go and look at the list of original Ethereum investors to the extent that it's public. It was very different with Bitcoin. Satoshi published his white paper, laid everything out before he started mining Bitcoin. The only reason he mined Bitcoin, he presumably did not do it for the money because he's never accessed that money, that wealth. He mined it because there were no other Bitcoin miners at that time. And so he was personally securing the network on his personal computer, a CPU, I assume. And so this was very different. All the early Bitcoiners were geeky cryptographer, mathematician types. They were into it for the intellectual and ideological reasons, not to get rich. Bitcoin didn't even have a price in the early days, and all the early Bitcoiners really didn't seem to care about the money. Unlike this, Ethereum was set up as a way for Vitalik to get a lot of people around the world to send him their Bitcoin. And this is how it was funded. You sent them your Bitcoin, he gave you Ethereum, and then he sold off the Bitcoin to fund his personal lifestyle. He's obviously sold off 25% of his Ethereum, as I've talked about in previous videos, and also to fund his business, which he calls it a foundation. This is more of a legal structure distinction. Now, people will point out that Satoshi does have 1 million Bitcoin. These were not the result of a pre-mine or an insider pre-sale. He actually mined them on his laptop, and they've never been moved or spent, unlike Vitalik, who has sold millions of dollars worth of ETH. Satoshi disappeared 10 years ago. He's no longer the driving force behind the project, unlike Vitalik. People worry about Satoshi selling his coins. 1 million coins, which is roughly a little less than 5% of the total supply, could be sold over time. The market for Bitcoin has obviously become very deep, very liquid, much deeper and more liquid and a larger market cap than Ethereum. So if this is an exit scam, it's the longest running exit scam in history, Satoshi could have sold these coins many years ago. He could certainly be selling them now. There's sufficient liquidity, but Satoshi is either dead or not interested in the money. And this is the basic ethos of Bitcoiners, especially the early Bitcoiners. They were highly ideological, they were highly technical and mathematical, and they weren't interested in this money. Whereas the early Ethereans, it was all about the money. And that's why you had this unfair pre-mine, pre-sale, which has really subsequently determined all the dynamics of Ethereum. This is the original sin or the founding problem with Ethereum. And as we've seen in this video, it means that when there are problems, the fix will be used to help the original insiders, as with the DAO, and rather than maintaining a truly credible, credibly neutral money, where instead of breaking contracts when you want to break them, you just let all contracts stand and you don't try to do these hard forks to rescue people when they're your people, and then avoid doing a hard fork when it's someone else's people. This is one of the major problems with Ethereum, and it's a big problem for me because I do like DeFi. I think it's really cool, but it's built on Ethereum. At least currently it's all built on Ethereum, or mostly built on Ethereum, and Ethereum is moving to proof of stake, which again is just a way to help original holders of Ethereum. Proof of stake is not nearly as secure as proof of work either. So DeFi is built on this foundation of sand. It's built on a foundation that has this really ugly history of pre-sales, pre-mines, and hard forks that exist only to help insiders. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.